Well, hello there. Oh boy, I've already ruined it. Guitar signal flow can be very complicated, but today we're gonna make it super easy. I even brought a whiteboard. Let's get into it. So the first thing we're gonna talk about is your guitar signal in series or in parallel. The classic example of in series signal routing is your guitar effects pedalboard. So your guitar comes in, it goes into a box, comes out of that box, goes into another box, and so on and so forth. These two effects are now in series. One happens after the other. Think of it like a Netflix series. They happen in a certain order, right? So that's guitar effects in series. In parallel is different. And parallel splits the signal and then combines it after affecting it on one side. Let me do this in color. I'll make it even more fun. So your guitar signal comes in blue. It gets split. It hits some sort of effect that turns it red. And then it's combined with its own normal blue signal. And then when those two signals are combined, you get something else. Let me give you a quick example in Logic. Okay, so I went ahead and recorded a little bit of guitar, and it sounds like this bone dry. It's just mono, straight in, nothing fancy happening yet. Now let's take that same signal and we'll add an effect to it. Now I'm going to pull up this pedalboard and add a little bit more dirt and a delay pedal to it. So these effects are in series currently. So you've got the distortion hits the delay and then that gets printed onto the signal. Okay, so now I've added in a splitter, and what's that doing? You can see the signal flow here. So it's starting on this side, splitting to these two parallel signals, parallel lines, and then the first one is getting distorted, the second one is getting the delay, and then those are being mixed back into each other. So right in the middle, you hear both. So just the dirty line, that's going to be the A line here. Now just the B line, that's going to be the delayed line. Mix of the two. So you might be noticing a little bit of phasing happening, and I think I can fix that. If I go to the delay pedal and go 100% with the mix, that should only give me the wet signal and none of the dry signal. So I'll only hear the repeats now. Let's verify that that's true. So that fixed a little bit of the phasiness that we were hearing in the middle of the sound, but now it's introduced a new problem, and that's that there's too much of the mix. Well, now I can blend here between how much of the wet signal versus how much of the dry signal. So let's start with none of the wet signal. There you go, parallel signal. Now compression is one thing that uses a lot of parallel paths. You'll see a lot of compressors have a mix knob on them, and that allows you to blend in your dry signal with your compressed signal. Sometimes you get the best results with having both in the signal path. A good example of this is like a chorus pedal. So inside the chorus pedal, your signal is split into two. One side that's completely unaffected, the other side gets pitch modulated. So your pitch is literally doing that inside a chorus pedal. And then when it comes out, you get a blend of those two signals. And that's how you get the chorus effect. So now I've got a chorus plugin pulled up, and this is going to give us a couple of things. It's going to give us a dry signal, a 100% wet signal, which is just pitch vibrato, and then it's going to give us the chorus sound, which is the blend between the two. With it at 0%, unaffected, 100% wet is going to give us the pitch vibrato. Kind of seasick, right? Well, watch me pull it back to like 30%. So it's blending in your dry signal with that pitch vibrato, and that's how that works. Wet dry is very similar, but the two sounds are not mixed back in together. So you get one signal in, it's split into two. One dry signal is unaffected, it continues on. The next signal is affected, and then it continues on its own path to its own source most of the time. So you might see that happens where it's going into two different amps. One of them is the wet signal, one of them is the dry signal. All right, so as you can see, I've doubled that track. This is literally the same exact recording, so this is now putting out technically dual mono, which just makes it louder. It doesn't do anything. But I have on the second one, I have the chorus effect at 100%. So with these, now that you have both of them in the center, you're getting a blend, which is creating a chorus effect. Now, if I split those left and right, this becomes wet dry. Now, if you're not listening to these in headphones, you're missing out on all the fun. This is now the width just went whoosh. Everything was straight up the middle, and then it got panned out. And watch what happens when I just turn off this chorus effect, which is technically vibrato effect. Straight up the middle. As you can see, they're panned hard left and hard right. So this is dual mono. I change one side, affect the pitch on one side, and all of a sudden it goes from straight up the middle to being super wide. That's pretty sick. Very similar to this, but one step more complicated, is wet, dry, wet. That's where you get your dry signal going along. It gets split off into some sort of wet signal and continues on. And then that hits 3 different amps. The way this is done is in a mix. This one becomes your left signal, this one becomes your center signal, and this one becomes your right signal. The benefit of wet dry is that you have the ability to mix between the two while you have the wet signal and the dry signal both up the center. With wet dry wet, you're going to take those 2 wet signals and hard pan them left and right, leaving the dry signal still straight up the middle. This gives you the ability to blend how much of the wet effects you want while also getting the stereo width that a lot of these pedals are built for. Here's a quick example. Okay, so now I've taken the chorus off of things, and now we've got Valhalla Supermassive on just one instance of the guitar. Now that is 100% wet, so I'm not getting any dry signal after the Valhalla is doing its good work. And then I have the 100% dry signal here. Now, the reason this is wet, dry, wet is because the Valhalla signal is turning it into a stereo signal coming back. And that's coming back in hard left and right. And then your dry signal is still straight up the middle. So here is just my dry signal. Here is just my wet signal. Here is both. Now listen to the difference when I mute my dry signal and then use the mix knob here. So the main benefit I could see from using this is instead of being tied to that mix knob to decide how much volume you're getting, and at a certain point, your dry signal starts to disappear and to make room for the wet signal. If you want to keep getting that wet signal louder and louder, depending on how extreme you want to be with the effect, going this route with like a wet, dry, wet gives you the ability to have those stereo effects and have those stereo effects loud. Here's what I'm talking about. I'll go 100% on this, and then I'll just start bringing the level up. So that's wet, dry, wet. Up next, mono versus stereo versus dual mono. Mono is, of course, the easiest one to explain. Well, it's just one signal. Nothing else added, nothing split, just a single signal. Stereo effects will split your signal into two, and they will change each side equally, but with different timing. Like, think for instance, like a ping pong delay would bounce left and right at different times. Well, a stereo reverb is doing that at a microscopic level, just very fast, but different on the left and the right side. So you've got both sides are affected, but they may be oppositely affected in some way. And then those hit two separate sources at the end. Pan them hard left and right, and then you get all this amazing width. Dual mono, on the other hand, comes in and splits your signal, and after it splits your signal, it does the exact same change on both sides, and then is split to two separate sources. That's pretty close to exact, right? With dual mono, you're not going to hear stereo width the same way that you would with stereo, because you have to have some difference between the left and the right. Lastly, guitar effects loops. Now this happens with an amp that specifically has a send and return, typically on the back of the amp. So your guitar is going to send signal to, say, a couple of pedals. Then it's going to hit your amp. Out of your amp, it's going to send signal to a couple more pedals, and then go back into your amp. The preamp section is where the majority of the overdrive sound of an amp is coming from. So if you want to put your wet effects after that overdrive, you want to put it after the preamp and before the power amp section. So a effects loop normally splits your signal before it hits that power amp and then folds it back in before it gets sent out to the speaker. Now this is really useful if you're running a high gain sound and you want to run all of your wet effects after that distortion that you're getting from your amp. This is the only way to do that I know of. I hope that clears up some confusion and you had some light bulb moments with this. Of course, if you have any more questions, hit me up in the comments. And I can't make a video like this without shouting out That Pedal Show. If it weren't for Dan and Mick, I wouldn't understand any of these concepts. They've done an amazing job of explaining them over the years. So please do me a favor and go check out That Pedal Show. Give them a follow and tell them Dave sent you. They don't actually know me, but... Okay, one last thing. Terminology with music gear can be really confusing, but terminology with music theory can be even more confusing. So I made a video here explaining the most commonly misunderstood music terms. Give it a watch. Yeah.